Today we have a transition words question. You'll see these in the reading and writing test, usually around numbers 22 to 25, something like that. And so the idea here is we need to read the text and try to figure out which of these transition words will preserve the progression of ideas, the logical flow. We want each sentence to lead into the next in a logical fashion so that the thread of the argument or the thread of the narrative is carried through the whole text in a smooth way, and there are no breaks, jumps, gaps, strange shifts. Everything should sort of flow and work logically. So starts off by saying a 2017 study of sign language learners tested the role of iconicity, the similarity of a sign to the thing it represents in language acquisition. The study found that the greater the iconicity of a sign, the more likely it was to have been learned. Blank, the correlation between acquisition and iconicity was lower than that between acquisition and another factor studied, sign frequency. The first thing I like to do here when we're trying to figure out our word is kind of make a little bit of a prediction about the kind of word, the kind of transition we're looking for. And I think here we have more of a contrasting shift between the previous sentences and the sentence starting with this blank. The previous sentence lays out this link or this correlation between iconicity and the likelihood that a sign is learned. But then our sentence with the blank shifts away from that and says that actually this correlation is lower than the correlation between acquisition and another factor, and they say that's sign frequency. So we have a little bit of a shift, right? We're laying out initially the connection between these two ideas, but then, right, notice that word but then we want to say that nonetheless there's this other factor that's maybe more significant. So I need a word here that shows that shift as a result, which is a cause and effect type word. It's not what we want because, again, we're shifting in a different direction. We're contrasting. In other words would be used if you want to restate or redefine something. And here we're not simply restating or redefining the previous sentence. We're, again, shifting away from it in a contrasting way. So now we're down to A versus C. Both of these can be used in contrasting situations depending on the context. In fact, though, the only way that in fact is going to work is if we're clearly setting up a statement and then a kind of reinterpretation or reevaluation of that statement. So if the text said something like, many scientists think that iconicity is the most important factor in language acquisition. In fact, and then we lay out sort of the contrast, that would make sense. But here, I don't think we have that strong of a contrast, so I think we can get rid of A. So why does granted work? So granted you would use when you're trying to concede a point, when you're trying to admit something that perhaps goes against some of the previous things you were saying, right? When you want to grant a position or grant something that, again, is discordant or contrasting with what you've previously stated. And notice that's exactly what's going on here. The previous sentence in this blank is laying out, the sentence previous to this blank lays out the correlation between iconicity and acquisition. However, we also want to grant the fact that maybe there are other factors that are more important, such as sign frequency. So of the choices here, C is the one that gives us that contrast, and it's the right kind of contrast in this context. And so that leads us to choice C.